at a major transition point in the history of the United States and probably of the whole world. I know that sounds grandiose, and I don't normally. Did that happen? Well, on the one hand, when corporations went to China and took advantage of low wages and a growing market, it made a fortune for those corporations, and therefore for the top 10% of Americans who own shares. Just a footnote, the top 10% richest Americans own 80% of the stocks and bonds. They did well. The rest of us, we are experiencing a declining empire, which those at the top don't want you to think about. They're managing it quite well. We cannot. That inequality, together with the inflation, gives you Mr. Trump's victory and the bitterness and divisiveness that is suffusing this economy. And still, nobody willing to face these realities or to speak about them. Every country now understands that the United States has changed. It is not going to administer an empire of the whole world, keeping the peace and having everyone rely on it doing that. It is just like Mr. Trump sometimes says, we're throwing all of that out the window. We are now going to weaponize our remaining assets. We're no longer the biggest economic bloc in the world. That's China and the BRICS. But we're big enough that we can threaten and weaponize and force the rest of the world to give us a portion of its wealth. You know what that means beyond a change of the last 50 years economic policy? It means the United States is advertising itself as the new #1 rogue nation in this world. Even China, Japan, and South Korea announced they're getting together. Those three countries have a history of tension and conflict and bitterness. All of that was put aside. They're meeting together, and I quote, to coordinate their response to Mr. Trump. Europe, who could never unify and therefore gave up the ghost as an economic powerhouse when they were allied with the United States, may, by result of Mr. Trump, be able to unify against the United States. I admit, it's a long shot. Disunity in Europe is intrinsic to that poor continent. But that's the reality. No one should be fooled. The isolation of the United States is what we are watching big time. Mr. Trump's herky-jerky behavior, the Canada-Mexico tariff, go up, then it goes down, then it is modified, then it is adjusted. And now we are told that he's willing to negotiate with all of the other tariff victims to get this from this one, to get that from the... Here's what that means. It means that none of these tariffs are a certainty. No planning corporation can say, okay, this is the new level of expenses I have with the tariff being what it is. So I'm going to compare when I decide where to build my next factory, all my options. He can't do that because the tariff that he's counting may not be there next month, may not be there next year, in which case the enormous expense. That's why it's so important what Michael just said. It takes years and a lot of money to move a production facility from one place to another, or to reorganize your supply chain, because instead of building in this country over the next 10 years as you had planned, you're going to have to move your new factories, and that means you have to rearrange your supply line. All of that is enormously expensive. No corporation is going to undertake those expenses only to discover, after having spent $2 billion, that the $5 billion project is now to be abandoned because the tariffs were changed on your supplier, on you. He can't do what he is doing. It will mean that corporations are hesitant, will hold back on these decisions, will delay them. And as every undergraduate student in economics learns, In capitalism, we are all held hostage to corporate plans about investment. The working class gets money and spends it. End of conversation. Not interesting. The corporate sector earns profits and then decides whether or not to invest them if it's profitable. If it isn't, they'll lend it to the United States government or put it in some other non-productive activity. And that will cause us depressions, recessions, delays, all kinds of stuff. No one talks about this. Mr. Trump wants the freedom. He likes the deal to be made. Yeah? Well, no one explained to him. None of his advisors, who all have PhDs, or many of them do, from fancy universities, just like Michael and me, but they didn't explain to him, you can't do that, as if it had no effect. The United States isn't the overwhelming powerhouse that it was in the second half of the 20th century. That's the empire that's over. And this is the desperate, largely blind, desperate gesture of a government that cannot admit where it is and fantasizes that it can do all these things as if they're automatic. Now, number two. Tariffs are not new. Tariffs have been used by countries, including the United States, at various points in their history. There is a huge literature, books and articles. Courses are taught in every economics department called international trade or international economics, and they have a segment of the course on tariffs. I've taught the courses. I know what I'm talking about. Mr. Trump clearly doesn't. What does the literature teach us? The impact of a tariff depends on the circumstances in all of the countries affected by the tariff. You cannot know in advance it will have this particular outcome. Why not? Because it depends on interest rates, on exchange rates, on monetary movements, on whether or not the countries retaliate. And if they do retaliate, how will there then be response on the United States part? Secretary of the Treasury made a statement yesterday that he hopes no country retaliates. And when the reporter asked him why, he said, because then there'll be escalation, as if what Mr. Trump has just done isn't escalation. The level of BS here is overwhelming. Mr. Trump cannot know what the consequence will be. Will there be an inflation? Probably. Will it be hard and terrible? Could be. Will it be mild? Could be. You know, there is no way to do this. The important thing here is that this is a declaration of desperation, not liberation. This is an economy that has to now attack the whole world. That's it. That's what it's doing. It's making difficulties for every other country. And it's now holding the gun to every country, as Michael just explained. It now is going to say, we will negotiate bilaterally, one by one, and we will play with these tariffs in order to squeeze you for some other agenda that we have or will develop. We want a piece of this mine. We want you not to pass that law. We want you to give us this money, or maybe give us Greenland, or whatever else he has in mind. If the United States were still a superpower, it wouldn't need to do this. That's why Obama didn't. That's why Bush didn't. That's why Clinton. It's not that they're any less smart than Mr. Trump or any less committed to making America number one. They didn't need to. We supported free trade for the last 50 years because the United States did real well for the people that matter in this country and dribbled off enough to the rest to keep them quiet. They can't do it anymore, so they now want, as Michael says, a tributary economy. You better give us TikTok. You better give us the Panama Canal. You better give us Greenland. You better give us your minerals. Look at the deal they're imposing on Mr. Zelensky, etc., etc. This is now thievery, open and undisguised the way it had been before, but it's a sign of desperation. You don't want to do this. Let me tell you where this is going to go, because Americans have a stunning inability to imagine that other people have the same understanding they do. The people of the world are understanding the United States has become their enemy. Look at the numbers. Canadians are not coming here as tourists anymore. European governments are telling trans people around the world it's not safe to travel to the United States. Well, that anger and that bitterness will now be enhanced by the governments there, who are wanting to get out of the blame for the difficulties this is going to cause. If Germany cannot sell its BMWs and its Mercedes in this country anymore because of these whopping tariffs, and they have to lay off large numbers of German workers, that's going to be explained to the German people. That's Mr. Trump. The Americans are doing that to you. Now, guess what? Angry people around the world are going to stop buying American. Look at what has happened in the last 3 months to the Tesla automobile. Nobody will touch it. Mr. Musk is discovering that there are real costs to prancing around the stage with a chainsaw, celebrating how he's firing tens of thousands of workers. Well, guess what? They have a way of getting back at him, whether it's damaging a Tesla car or anything. American goods in the rest of the world, they're not going to all be wearing jeans because Americans are. They're going to find a new pair of pants not produced in the United States, and the jeans market will dissolve. That's just the tip of the iceberg here. Mr. Trump is telling a story, a fanciful story about these wonderful things that are going to flow from what he's done. He doesn't tell you even the most elementary honesty of all the things that could go wrong here. And the notion that none of them will happen, that's so preposterous, he can't afford to be honest. He has to be a huckster, an advertiser. Remember what an advertiser is. A person who figures out real and imagined good things about his client's project and product, and he makes disappear all the bad ones. This can only help you. It won't hurt you. It's the mentality of the advertiser, only this person is now the leader and is telling us desperate stories. His client is an empire going down. Civilian labor force of the federal government, 2.5 million people. The other 2.5 that the federal government pays are the military. I'm going to put them aside. So 2.5 million people are federal government. If you wanted to have efficiency, you would look at the federal government, but we have two other levels of government, state government and local government. And they're much bigger. State government across 50 states is 5 million civilian employees, and local government, 15 million. So state and local is 20 million. Federal government is 1/10, 2.5 million. If you're interested in efficiency, why would you go after the smallest one? That's stupid. But here's the stupidity even worse. In the 1960s, if you look at the list, the government federal civilian employees, 2.5 million. Here we are, a half century later, our population 100 million people bigger, and we still service them with 2.5 million civilian federal employees. You know what economists call that? Efficiency. 2.5 million are servicing 100 million more. That's the last place then you would go and cut. If you're interested in government efficiency, have a program to deal with state and local. If you actually, this is all fake. This is all foolery. Or if you like, advertising. He's advertising, hoping that no one knows what I just told you. But that is the reality. I didn't make these numbers up. And you'll never hear those numbers from the spokespersons because of what they obviously tell you, which is this is talk about Mr. Trump's fake news. He's generating fake news at a speed way ahead of all of those he criticized for that over his lifetime. Think of it this way. We have the 3% of our population that are employers. That's the top of our economic system. And that becomes the self-reproducing group of people. They make all the decisions, whether or not to invest the money, They're the ones who set the prices we pay, and they're the ones who pay the wages or not that we depend on. So we are controlled by the 3% of the employer. That's the way capitalism is set up, okay? They long ago understood, the people at the top, what they have to do, because we have a political system that is a little odd to go with a top-down economic system. In our political system, we have universal suffrage. Everybody gets one vote. Well, the vast majority of people, 97%, are not employers. 3% are. It would be easy to mobilize a majority of the 97% to limit the wealth of the 3%. In fact, you would expect that to happen because the 3% are the ones with all the money and the 97% are the ones who control the majority in the voting. The ruling class of 3% do in America. They bought the government, of course. That's how they protect their situation in a world of universal suffrage. And how did they do it? They did it with two political parties. Each of them depends on the 3% for their money, the donor class, if you like, the 3%, and now they divide. Half of them go to the right and mobilize and mass support, for things like guns and white supremacy and against abortion and all of that. And the other ones, they go for more liberal, progressive, social welfare, all of that, and minorities and women. And so we have two parties, both of whom control the mass of the vote. Now the punchline. What the system does is it goes to the rich people, says, you're the donors, we won't tax you. Then it goes, each party to its mass base, we'll take care of you, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. Here's the problem. You can't buy the mass of people unless you tax where the wealth is. But there is a way out. In the craziness of capitalism, you don't tax the wealthy, you do provide for the mass of people. And the way you do it is you go to the wealthy and you say, since we didn't tax you, you have all this money, please lend it to us. We'll give it back to you after a few years, plus pay you interest while you wait. That's called the deficit. And the reason we have a deficit is a deference to those at the top to not tax them to pay for the masses. I'll give you one simple example. Elon Musk, the last I looked, has $350 billion or more of personal wealth. If you taxed away, because we, the majority, voted for it, if you taxed away half his money, he'd still be the richest person on earth, but the government would have $250 billion with which to solve social problems. And you know who would be better off if we solved the social problems with his money? Mr. Musk. He would live in a less conflicted society. He would be less at risk from angry poor people, etc., etc., etc. It is irrational. And what you're watching with Mr. Trump in the Rose Garden is the irrational effort to deal with an irrational problem whose irrationality you dare not admit. So you're going to now do what? Punish the rest of the world. You know what that reminds me of? Every now and then here in the United States, a city, New York, Philadelphia, and it tries to solve its economic problems, once again, not taxing the rich, by taxing commuters. New York has famously toyed with that idea. The people of New Jersey get enraged because a government, not of them, another state, New York, is solving its problems in part on the back of people that are not New York voters, have no say in any of this. And so it usually comes to grief. You can't do that. You know why? Because it risks blowing the United States apart. And you know what Mr. Trump is doing? He's risking not blowing the world apart, it'll stay, but making the United States the isolated, rogue nation that this looks like to the rest of the world. Beware, that is a very large danger that will come back and bite this country in places I don't even want to think of.